Hello everyone, I'm Chris Dickman, president of CruiseReport.com. Today I want to talk to you about this framework for conditional sailing put out by the CDC. Is this just another name for a no-sail order? Most of you are probably already well aware that the no-sail order from the CDC expired at the end of October. And in its place, the CDC has come out with this framework for conditional sailing, and it's kind of a bunch of regulations that the cruise lines have to meet before they can begin operations again in U.S. waters. I want to talk about it a little bit. There's already been a lot of videos on YouTube about this. In my opinion, in effect, this is another no-sail order. What they've done is they have just kind of over-regulated it to the point that cruise lines, there's really not much way a cruise line can meet these standards. It's going to be very difficult. They certainly can't do it and make money. So let's talk about this just a little bit, and I'm going to tell you at the end kind of a harsh suggestion that I have for the cruise line industry. First, let me give you a little background. I love cruising. It's one of my passions in life. It's also my business. CruiseReport.com exists to bring you information on cruise ships, destinations, technology, and just anything around the cruise business. We're not travel agents. I don't sell cruises. We don't make any money if you buy a cruise. We are tied to the cruise industry, and we absolutely love it. So anything I say today, I want you to understand that it's not because I'm against cruising at all. Quite the opposite. This is just my opinion, and I'm always open to hear your opinions in the comments on this video. So let me just go through this document, and I printed it out and highlighted some areas that I want to talk about. Here is one section on page 7 that says unrestricted cruise ship travel would likely exacerbate and amplify the spread of COVID. On January 20th, 2020, the Diamond Princess cruise ship departed Yokohama, Japan, and on January 25th, a symptomatic passenger departed the ship in Hong Kong, where he was later confirmed to have COVID-19. Upon the ship's return to Yokohama, the Japanese authorities quarantined all passengers and crew on board the ship. Among the 3,700 Diamond passenger and crew, 3,700 passengers and crew on Diamond Princess, 712 were subsequently confirmed to have COVID-19. That's basically 19%. 37 required intensive care and 9 died. Following this outbreak, 2 voyages of the Grand Princess, and they go on to talk about the Grand Princess. But they use this and they cite this example as because of the increased risk of transmission on cruise ships. They're using this, they're setting this up as the example as to why this framework is the way it is. And in my opinion, the premise is flawed because they're citing a situation that happened before there was any social distancing, before anybody even knew about COVID-19. Everybody was going to the buffet. They were all handling utensils. They were all sitting together in big groups. They were getting on ship tenders, sitting right next to each other. They were sitting in the theater right next to each other. So yes, at that time, there was an increased risk because you're in close proximity. But cruise lines today have already implemented social distancing measures, mask wearing requirements, hand washing requirements. Most of them that are sailing in Europe and Japan and other countries have basically gone away from the self-serve buffet. So I don't know that their premise for this is valid. So let's go on. On page 11, it says current scientific evidence suggests absent mitigation measures of the type needed to prevent further transmission. And I want to emphasize where it says current scientific evidence. Cruise ships would continue to pose a greater risk of COVID-19 transmission than other settings. A recent article published in the Journal of Travel Medicine by, and they mention the name of the doctor, demonstrated that the Diamond Princess cruise ship, they're using Diamond Princess again as their premise, experienced an onboard reproduction rate of 14.8 before ship-wide quarantine was enacted. This means that each case on board the Diamond Princess transmitted COVID-19 to approximately 15 other people. Let me ask you this. They're saying that this is scientific evidence. How is that possible when there was no testing before those people got on Diamond Princess? How could they possibly know how many people spread the virus on Diamond Princess when they don't even know how many people were infected when they got on board the ship? For all they know, 100 people got on board Diamond Princess after a 12 to 14 hour flight in close proximity with other people who could have been infected. They don't have any way, I don't understand where they say scientific evidence. And they also cite an article published in the Journal of Travel Medicine. An article is not scientific evidence. And we've seen this throughout this whole COVID experience for the last year. Things that are referred to as scientific, which really aren't scientific. This is not scientific. They say the reproduction rate is approximately 4 times higher than that of the epicenter of the outbreak in Wuhan, China, which is 3.7, meaning that each person with COVID basically spread it to 3 or 4 other people. So now we're taking the word of the Chinese Communist government and believing their numbers. Am I the only one that sees this as flawed? Are the cruise lines reading this the way I'm reading it? Or am I the only one? Am I crazy? If I am, tell me. So I don't understand how they've determined that every infected person on Diamond Princess infected 14 other people. I don't understand, because I don't know how they knew how many people got on board the ship that were infected. There might have been 400 people infected when they got on board the ship, and they only infected 1 other person. How do they know that? If you know, tell me. I am willing to listen. That's why we have comments on these videos. I want to understand this. Please explain it to me. And then, of course, they go on to say, absent appropriate interventions to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, cruise ship conditions would likely amplify the spread of an already highly transmissible disease. And this person that wrote this article in the journal, the Medicine Journal, says heightened rate of transmission is due to the high population density on board ships, which are typically more densely populated than cities or most other living situations. Really? You're more densely populated on a cruise ship than you are on an airplane? Please explain this to me. I can go on a cruise, and Ricky and I, when we go on a cruise, we typically stay away from people anyway, because we go to be together. We don't go to mingle with other people. I know we're unique in that regard. But I can go on a cruise ship and never get within 20 feet of another person. I could stay in my stateroom or on my balcony. You're telling me that there's more risk. This document says there's more risk on a cruise ship than there is on an airplane, because the CDC has no such restrictions on airlines. Airlines can fly completely full right now. So you can be within 6 inches of 4 other people and within 2 feet of about 10 other people for up to 10 or 12 hours on an international flight. And that's okay. You're telling me that a cruise ship is more densely populated than that. Or what about a bar where there's a lot of people in a bar, or a wedding on a dance floor? I'm sorry, I ain't buying it. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels where they're asking the question, is the CDC anti-cruise? Is there an anti-cruise bias? The answer is pretty obviously yes. And I don't think it's just the CDC. I think it's the government in general. If we go to page 14, down at the bottom of page 14, public health oversight is further needed to correct a market failure stemming from information asymmetry. The public, and it says, in other words, the public is often not fully informed in such a way to adequately determine the extent of which any given measure mitigates their personal risk, particularly in the light of asymptomatic cases. And it goes on to talk some more. Basically, what that paragraph says is you are too stupid to know what's good for you. You obviously haven't been paying attention for the last 9 months, and you don't know what's good for you. And only these mitigation efforts, i.e. the government, the CDC, can keep you safe. Now, they go on and they talk a little bit about simulated cruises. Laboratory testing for every crew member must be conducted weekly. If any of you have had a COVID test, you know it's not a pleasant experience. So the cruise lines are going to have to make their crew members go through that experience every single week. A housing agreement. Now, this is on page 23 near the bottom, section 2. A housing agreement between the cruise ship operator and one or more shoreside facilities for isolation and quarantine of COVID-19 cases and close contacts, respectively, identified from the day of embarkation through disembarkation for each voyage in accordance with CDC instructions and orders. Now, let's think about that for a second. What that means is, the way I interpret this, you've got 3 or 4 cruise ships sailing out of Miami. These ships are designed to hold, I think, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people each. Now, part of the order is those ships cannot sail more than, I think it's 50 or 60% capacity. Let's say 50%. 4 cruise ships times 2,000 people, that's 8,000 people right there. That's if you only have 4 ships sailing out of Miami on a Saturday. Maybe you have another 4 sailing out on a Sunday. You've got to have housing. What if there's 500 people exposed to COVID-19 or 1,000 people exposed to COVID on one of those cruises or more than one of those cruises? Where are you going to find hotel rooms for 1,000 people on short notice? I don't know that that's even possible. I mean, yeah, you can have an arrangement with hotels and facilities, but I don't know if you'd be able to scale to the level that you could potentially need to. That's another requirement that I feel like is pretty much hard to swallow and almost impossible to do. In one section, it says, the cruise ship operator must also obtain from all volunteer passengers, and I'm assuming that's going to extend to passengers in the future, maybe, written certification from a healthcare provider that the volunteer passenger has no pre-existing medical conditions that would place the individual at risk for COVID-19. I don't know how many doctors are going to be willing to provide such a document. Does that put them at legal risk? So if I get this document from my doctor or from my, as they call it, healthcare provider, that certifies I'm okay to cruise and I can basically survive COVID-19, what if I don't survive? What if I attract COVID-19 and don't survive? Can my heirs sue that doctor for providing that document? I don't know how many because first of all, you'd have to have a doctor that you've been with for years. They've run all the tests necessary to make sure you don't have a heart condition or you aren't diabetic or you don't have some underlying condition that would predispose you to a bad outcome with COVID-19. In the absence of that kind of testing, I'm not sure many doctors are going to certify people, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy. But I could see a lot of doctors say, sure, I'll give you that certificate once you've had your stress test, once you've had $5,000 worth of medical tests to prove that you're okay. I don't know. That to me just seems, and if that's going to be a requirement in the future for going on a cruise, it's going to knock a lot of people out of cruising right there. The cruise ship operator must conduct laboratory testing of all passengers and crew on the day of embarkation and the day of disembarkation, as required by the CDC technical instructions and orders. Okay, now let's think about this. When you get a COVID test, best case scenario, they can get with a rapid test. I believe it's the antigen test. A rapid test you might be able to get the results in 30 minutes to an hour. That would be the best case scenario. So again, this document is prepared by bureaucrats. It's not prepared by scientists. It's not prepared by people that understand the cruise industry. You have a ship that holds 5,000 people, but let's say it's down to 2,500. Have you ever been on a ship with 2,500 people on the day of disembarkation? Well, let me tell you what happens if you haven't been. You get off the ship, you go through customs, you go to a baggage claim area, and you get your bag and you go to the parking lot and you get on a taxi or a bus or a coach to take you to the airport. There is no place, there is no space that I've ever seen at a port in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or any other port where 2,500 people can hang out for an hour and be socially distanced, waiting for test results to come back. So I don't know. And on top of that, the cruise line, you've got this turnover. And it's only several hours between the time a ship comes into port, gets everybody off the ship, then they got to clean the ship. Now they're going to have to disinfect the ship. And they do. And plus they got to test the crew. And they have to do all that within just a few hours because they've got another 2,500 people coming on board the very next or that same day. So now you're talking 5,000 tests that have to be performed. Embarkation, disembarkation, plus the crew. Could be 7,000 tests just for that ship. One ship. Where am I going to wait on the day of disembarkation? In what area am I going to wait at the port to get my test results? And how is that going to affect flights? That means instead of flying out of Fort Lauderdale or Miami at noon, I may have to get a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock evening flight. It would change the entire dynamic of disembarkation. So, and what if there is an infection? What if there are people who tested positive? Well, now that we've been put into a waiting room, we've now all been in close contact with people who are infected, and now we have to all be quarantined, and they've got to come up with 2,500 hotel rooms. I just don't know how cruise lines are going to make this happen. I don't see it happening, and that's why I say, in effect, this is a no-sail order. Now, another thing that the CDC has said, and I'm going to set this aside for now, no cruises longer than 7 days. Now, let's think about that. Let's say you had a 7-day cruise and there's not one single person that had COVID-19. You basically had a good, clean cruise. It would be safer to go another 7 days with those same people. In other words, a 14-day cruise could be safer than a 7-day cruise because every time you end a cruise and start another cruise, you bring on another 2,500 people or 5,000 people that could be infected. But yet the CDC has said no sailings more than 7 days. I understand their logic, but their logic is flawed as well. So how does that affect crossings? What if I want to get on a ship in Fort Lauderdale and go across the ocean to Europe and disembark in Europe? Are they saying that they can't sell Atlantic crossings anymore? No more Panama Canal cruises? I don't know how much thought has gone in. And I know the cruise lines are looking at this and saying, what the hell? So I don't know how the cruise lines are supposed to respond to this, but I'm going to give you a suggestion. And this is pretty radical, and I hope you take it the way it's intended. This is not going to end. It's not going to end with COVID-19. The CDC has kind of had it out for cruise lines for a long time because of norovirus. They were already telling people not to go on cruise ships because they could get the norovirus. So if you think when COVID-19 goes away, and I think what's going to happen with COVID-19 is probably they're going to say you have to have a vaccine to get on board. I really think that's where this is headed. But the CDC has always had an anti-cruise sentiment anyway. And the government in it has an anti-cruise sentiment beyond the CDC. My guess is my suggestion for the cruise lines, you're burning through about $1 billion a month right now with these ships not sailing. I think Carnival alone is $700 and some million a month. Royal Caribbean, another couple hundred million. NCL, another 175 or 200 million a month. So between all the major cruise lines, you're burning through more than billion, maybe $1.5 billion a month because you can't sail. I would look into doing what most other corporations have done over the last 30 or 40 years. Get the hell out of the United States of America. Why do you think so many companies headquartered now in Japan or move their factories to Japan or China or Mexico or Canada or France or anywhere? We don't even build cruise ships anymore because the regulations are so strict and so stringent, we can't build a cruise ship affordably to compete with countries like Norway or Japan or France or Germany. So what am I suggesting? Take some of these billions of dollars that you're burning through, go down to Nassau or the Bahamas, cut a deal with one of these little third world countries, build out the most beautiful state-of-the-art airport and cruise ship port, pool your resources. All the cruise lines could do this as a consortium. Build out this beautiful cruise port, find a country, find an island. Have a monorail that goes from the airport to the cruise ship, which is the way it ought to be anyway. And build your own Disney World, basically, for cruising. And get away from these CDC regulations because it's not going to end with the CDC. Once the CDC stops messing with you, the next thing is going to be the Department of Energy, or it's going to be the environmentalists that really don't want cruising anyway. They don't even want airplanes and cars. You think they want cruise ships? So the government is going to come after you anyway, whether it's the CDC or the environmental agencies like the FDA or FTC. It doesn't matter who it is. Any of those three-letter bureaus are going to come after you, and they're going to make your life a living hell. Or how about minimum wage? They're going to come after you and say, hey, if you're not paying all your employees minimum wage, you can't sail in the United States. And you know what? I've seen a lot of people on cruise ships that complain about, oh, it's so these people that are from Indonesia or the Philippines, the cruise lines take advantage of them because they don't pay what American has decided is a valid minimum wage. But they love that $399 7-night cruise. You do realize that if the cruise lines pay everybody minimum wage on the cruise ships, your cruise is now going to be $2,000 for 7 nights on an inside cabin as opposed to $399 for 7 nights. Please try to understand that. It all comes back to you. And the same is true of these CDC orders. All of these things the cruise lines are going to be required to do as far as testing and mitigation efforts, it's only going to increase the price of cruising. I would consider building like a Disneyland, but do it in the Bahamas. Build out a huge airport where planes can fly from the U.S., land there. The U.S. has no jurisdiction in that country. And at the same time, you're still doing all the mitigation. You're doing everything you can to keep people safe. But nobody can be guaranteed safety. Nobody. People know the risks when they take a cruise. They know the risks when they get on an airplane. Like I say, the CDC doesn't seem to think there's any problem with you getting on a 10-hour flight to Europe, sitting 6 inches away from 4 people and within 2 feet of probably 7 or 8 other people, and you're in a COVID tube for 10 hours. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts, your comments. Put them in the comment section down below. Thanks for joining me. Check out our website. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'll see you next time.